right, so this is Chapter 4, Section 4 for geometry using corresponding parts of congruent triangles. So we are going to work our way backwards. We are going to use triangle congruence, so showing that triangles are congruent, and then we can say, oh, this is congruent by side angle side. Therefore, all the other pieces of this triangle have got to be congruent. So use triangle congruence and corresponding parts of congruent triangles to prove that parts of two triangles are congruent. What kind of proof is this in problem 1? What type of proof? It's a flow chart proof. That's right. So remember there's 3. Which one is my favorite?
Which one?
2 column. Yeah, 2 columns my favorite. Flow chart would happen to be my least favorite. Paragraph, mid, I can live with. So in problem 1, we are given that angles KBC, so that's this bottom left angle here, and ACB are congruent, and angle K is congruent to angle A. We need to prove that KB, this side here, is congruent to AC. So what we're going to do first is take our given information. We have 2 angles. If we have 2 angles, what do we need for congruence? A side. So we can use angle, angle, side. So we need to show that BC is congruent to BC, and we know that because reflexive. That's why it hit us in the face previously, and it's still hitting us in the face now. If we show that BC is congruent to BC, then we can say triangle KBC is congruent to triangle ACB. And if that's the case, then KB is congruent to AC because I've proven my triangle is congruent. So then any part and the corresponding part have got to be congruent also. This is sometimes abbreviated as corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. CPCTC. If instead of writing the words corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, you want to abbreviate it CPCTC, please feel free. All right, with that information, let's see if we got it. All right, so we are given BA is congruent to DA, that's these 2 sides here, and CA is congruent to EA. We want to prove that angle C is congruent to angle E. The first thing we do is we have to prove that these 2 triangles are congruent. What's our, besides reflexive, what's our other favorite property for proving stuff? Vertical. So we are going to say, so should we write this 2 column? Let's write this 2 column. This is our statement. This is our reason. Our statement is BA congruent to DA. And I'm going to cheat. I'm going to put this on the line too. CA is congruent to EA because these are given. Second thing we're going to say is that angle CAB is congruent to angle EAB because CAB is congruent to EAD, sorry, D, because the vertical angles are congruent. This is the vertical angles theorem. I love vertical angles theorem. So, 3 says our triangles are congruent. So now we can say triangle CAB is congruent to triangle EAD. And we can say that because angle, side, angle, side. Side, angle, side postulate. This is awesome. I'm rolling right into this other shenanigans. And then 4 says, no, we can say that angle C is congruent to angle E because corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Once I prove my triangle's congruent, it's all on. Angle C is congruent to angle E. B is congruent to D. Side CB is congruent to side EB. I can say all that stuff because I've proven my 2 triangles are congruent. Okay, so let's take another. Do you guys have all this down? I know. Such good handwriting. I don't know why you wouldn't have that written down already. All right, so name 4 ways you can use congruent parts of 2 triangles to prove that the triangles are congruent. We can prove it by side, side, side. We can prove it by side, angle, side. Prove it by angle, side, angle. And we can prove it by angle, angle, side. Those are the 4 triangle congruence postulates we can use to prove that triangles are congruent. All right, so let's look at this question number 8. And let's see if we can highlight everything and move it. This will be like a crazy. Let's just move all this down. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so complete the steps in this proof. So I have 2 triangles, ABC and triangle ADC. We are given the items on this triangle, and we're wanting to prove the 2 triangles congruent. So let's write down AB is congruent to AD and BC is congruent to DC because that's the information that's given to us. We can say AC is congruent to itself by the reflexive property. We can say angle D is congruent to angle B. And we can say angle DAC is congruent to angle BAC because all that information is given right up here. I promise I didn't sneak it in. So we say DAC is congruent to, or sorry, DCA BCA because that's given. Oh, feels like, oh no, so third angle theorem. So remember, we did the angles. If we know 2 angles in a triangle are congruent, we can say that that third angle is also congruent. Did that yesterday. Therefore, let's grab that one. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ADC because the definition of congruent triangles. So this is the hard way, where we have to show all the angles are congruent, all the sides are congruent. All right, so if we're looking at this figure up here, to prove triangles are congruent, you know, when you know 2 pairs of congruent corresponding sides, you can, so we have 2 sides, we could use side, side, side and find the third side, or we can use, it's got to have 2 S's in it, side, angle, side.
Nice.
All right, so number 11 says, the given states, and the diagram shows that there are, your choices are 1, not 1, but 2 pairs of congruent sides, just 2. 2 pairs of congruent sides. All right. Let's rapid fire this. BA is congruent to DA by what? Please say it's given, right?
Yes.
Is it? Usually the first item is given. There's crazy life things happen, but most of the time it's going to be given. CA is congruent to EA. Is it given up here? Yeah, so it's going to be given. Angle CAB is congruent to EAD. How can we say that those two angles are congruent? Is it reflexive or is it vertical? Which one?
Vertical.
Because vertical angles are congruent.
Yep.
And then triangle CAB is congruent to EAD because side angle side. And once we show that the entire triangle is congruent, we can say that any of its corresponding parts are also congruent. Because corresponding parts of triangles are congruent. Alright, so we're given AB is congruent to AC, so under this given category, it's this information here. M is the midpoint of BC is also a given information. The reflexive property says AM is congruent to, what's reflexive? Yeah, AM, it's like looking in a mirror. Now we have side, we have two sides, AB and AC. We have that this is the midpoint, and we have that AM is congruent to itself. So we got, right now we have side and a side. Definition of midpoint says BM is congruent to CM. That's what a midpoint does. It cuts the shape into two congruent halves. So now we have that this is congruent to this. How many sides do we have? 3. So we can say by side theorem, triangle AMB is congruent to AMC. And then we take our last statement and we say, because corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, angle AMB is congruent to angle AMC.